Disruptions in factory production, a diminished workforce, fears of lockdowns in new countries trying to curb the spread of the COVID-19 virus. For Watson EP Industries, a manufacturing business, these were some of the challenges it faced since its factory in China was affected by the shutdown.
We're very lucky we managed to start on the first day they allow, which is on the 10th February. But because some of our workers in China were still in lockdown cities like Hubei and Wuhan, we managed to get about 60% of our workforce back at the beginning, the first week.
The manufacturing sector was picking up in the fourth quarter of 2019 when COVID-19 emerged. The outbreak triggered unprecedented isolation measures, first in Wuhan in China, which saw a big outbreak. And that lockdown affected manufacturing and retail in some countries more than others.
The countries that have been most affected by our analysis has been Vietnam and Malaysia. If we look specifically at which industries, it looks to have been textiles and electronics in particular.
I would say that COVID made everyone realize they were still highly reliant on their supply chain to China. Some 45-50% of MNCs interviewed said they were all affected. Maybe, for Asians, up to 75% were affected. So the first wave of COVID affected supply chain.
Many companies like Watson EP Industries were able to manage through the initial lockdown in China as they had extra stock. But eventually, they had to look for alternatives.
There are some suppliers that we have actually started dual sourcing or even triple sourcing. For example, some electronic components that we use. All these are actually available globally, but it's at what cost, who has the stock and at the right price. We have sourced even as far as Europe.
Our customers are starting to redirect and find new sources of supply, right, within the ASEAN. So that bodes well for countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia. And I think the ASEAN bloc can become stronger after this as part of alternative supplies.
Vietnam, Taiwan and Korea are probably the three most viable alternate sources of production to China if firms do rethink their supply chains.
Experts warn there are challenges in finding alternatives.
I do have to stress that this is not something that can probably happen overnight. I mean, firms are tied into long-term contracts. It often takes a while to source these new suppliers, so this is something that's going to happen, over the next kind of couple of years, as opposed to in the next couple of weeks. So, in the meantime, that reliance on China is still going to remain in place.
And for companies like EP Watson Industries, it's also difficult to find alternative sources for highly customized items.
There are some suppliers that we cannot dual source because they have a customized, highly unique tool that is specific for this product. So the only way is to do a tool transfer. If we find that the supplier is unable to supply for extended period of time, then we will transfer to another supplier who has the same equipment and can produce of the same quality.
What can companies do then?
With the global markets meltdown, there will be two opportunities. The first I see is in the M&A opportunity, the mergers and acquisition piece. As company valuations have come down, big companies are now thinking, maybe I should go up and down the value chain. I should start buying companies outside my own home country to get access to manufacturing facilities that will complement my own home country, right? So as to diversify risk. So we're seeing that happening. The second opportunity I see, companies are now going to have to digitize faster than they would have.
For now, new coronavirus cases are declining in China. People are returning to work. Factories are also resuming production. Could it be business as usual soon?
I think it's all about price competitiveness. I think China has become very efficient in the last 10, 20 years. Manufacturing has become very efficient, which is why I think whether it's Europe or the US, everybody's quite reliant on China. They've gone up the value chain of production. So, and I think price-wise, efficiencies, China is still the number one location.
The factories, it depends on which province in China. Some have already gone to 100%. Some are still at about 50-75%. We see definitely recovery at a reasonable pace. We also see that they have adopted digital technologies and they were very fast to pivot. China has always been in the forefront of leapfrogging in technology, and I think this has quickened the pace of adoption, digital adoption.
But while Chinese factories work on returning to normal, other countries are now grappling with rising cases of the coronavirus. And that could mean a fall in demand and orders.
COVID next wave, now that it's become a global disease or global pandemic, according to WHO, means that we've gone from a supply chain issue to a demand destruction issue, right? Because for Jan, Feb, and March, the supply chain got disrupted, and then as it peaked in China and the workers got back to work and the ports started working again, that whole supply chain was alleviated. We went from 75% down to 50%, down to 25% down, right? So there was some alleviation of supply chain. Unfortunately, as the West caught the virus, the big question mark now is how long will this demand disruption and demand destruction last? Is it going to be another 3-6 months? Is it going to be a year? And that is a big question mark we don't have an answer to today.